Phantom Poets Touring Theatre Company of Canada presents the greatest Canadian tour of Tommy Douglas, The Arrows of Desire.
No wheat board, no crop insurance, no family allowances. Saskatchewan had no hospital insurance. People were seeing things as they were and asking why. We saw things as they ought to be and said, why not?
Dedicated to the memory of a man, Tommy Douglas, The Arrows of Desire is a historic presentation of a Canadian legend and his living legacy.
Now, the young doctor at the clinic told my mother that osteomyelitis had developed in the knee and the leg would have to be cut off. Well, you can imagine how traumatic that news was to a 9-year-old boy. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to the belief that in a civilized society, every child, every person should have access to necessary medical treatment no matter what their family's financial status. You can see where I'm going with this, can't you? The minstrel boy to the war is gone. In the ranks of death you will find him. His father's sword he hath girded on, and his wild harp slung behind him. I therefore dedicate myself this evening to the service of this constituency. That first provincial election campaign was no more than a learning experience. Winning was not an option. Still, 1934 will always be remembered as very special to me because that was the year our wonderful daughter Shirley was born.
From childhood recollections and defining moments in his life to the famous speeches and stories, Tommy Douglas, The Arrows of Desire, brings the passion and humor of Tommy Douglas to the stage in a show that pulls no punches.
What is free enterprise? It's every man for himself, shouts the elephant as he dances amongst the chickens. Well, it's quite all right if you're an elephant, but it's pretty depressing if you're a chicken. Now, still here in the 21st century, free enterprise is the law of the jungle applied to the marketplace. We must recognize how and why such people come to be where they are. If we do not, how many more Hitlers will we spawn?
Sit down, you communist! Boo! You're gonna start the revolution now? Commie, sit down!
Yes, I am a reformer, I admit that, and I prefer it to being a fossilized dinosaur. Reformers of the past prevented bloody revolution while reactionaries brought it on. Speaking of insanity, often visited mental institutions as a tourist. I was on the grounds once and I met this fellow and asked his name. He said, "I'm Bob, what's your name?" I said, "Oh, I'm Tommy Douglas. You know, the Premier of Saskatchewan." And he smiled and said, "Oh, well, you'll soon get over that." When I first arrived here, I thought I was Napoleon.
Tommy Douglas, The Arrows of Desire, the life on stage of Canada's greatest citizen.
Fight on, my friends. I am hurt, but I am not slain. You can lock up a mouse or a man, but you can't lock up an idea.
Phantom Poets Touring Theatre Company of Canada presents the greatest Canadian tour of Tommy Douglas, The Arrows of Desire.
People were seeing things as they were and asking why. We saw things as they ought to be and said, why not? Yes, I am a reformer, I admit that, and I prefer it to being a fossilized dinosaur. You can lock up a mouse or a man, but you can't lock up an idea.